Hi guys, this is Nightmare3464. I'm so sorry for the noise in the background of chapter 5. My phone went off. I'm so sorry. Anyway, let's continue reading. Stay with me, chapter 6. Okay? You ready to go, Jeffy? Ben asked, looking at Jeff. He was putting his two switchblades in his green pockets of his green pants, looking towards the other murderer. Jeff was stabbing his blade into boxes and barrel in certain areas, stopping and looking back at Ben with his unblinkable eyes, standing up straight and nodding. Yeah. What about you, Smiles? Ben looked over to see Smile with Jeff. Smile was licking his legs and cleaning off what Jeff guessed was blood on his furry limbs. The dog looked back to them. Hearing his name, he leaped up from the ground and started wagging his tail. With that, the two boys looked at each other and then nodded. Well, Smiles is ready. I guess I'm ready too. We better go look for your girlfriend, Ben said, turning his head towards the door. Smile followed him close behind. She's not my girlfriend, Jeff called out after him. A dark blush came over his face, his lightly white cheeks. Sighing, shaking his head, stabbing once more in the barrel, then following the other two. Ben rolled his eyes and chuckled at his friend. They reached outside. It was raining like crazy, hitting their faces. Jeff pulled up his hoodie and Ben pulling his hat further down. Ben looked at Smile and Jeff followed his eyes. Okay, Smile, you know where Masky and Hoodie and Jeff's girls sent, so sniff them out, boy. Smile barked at the blonde-haired boy and then put his head to the ground and began sniffing the mud. Jeff's anger is angry at Masky, and his blood was still boiling in his veins. Then he turned to a tree and began stabbing them, thinking that one of them was Masky. Plumbing his frustration, Ben looked at Jeff, who has never seen him act this angrily, but sometimes expecting him for losing a kill, or there was something else. But the anger he had never seen before. Then he looked back to see Smile was sniffing around them. Jeff stabbed his knife into the trunk of one of the close by trees. Serena's image flitted in his mind. Then he looked down, unable to close his eyes, and how can I be so stupid? I left her there. I knew something bad was going to happen, but Masky and Hoodie taking her? I expect her to run away, not get kidnapped. Fuck! I am so stupid. I stabbed the blade back into the tree, growling deep in my breath. It appeared like I was attacking its prey, like a predator attacking its prey. I stabbed repeatedly. My blood was boiling. Why was I so bent about this girl? Why do I have to protect her? What's so special that I can't kill her like the other women I murdered? Jeff! The smoky black-haired male jerked to look at the voice that was coming behind him. Ben, who was standing next to sitting by Smile Dog, grinning on the husky's face, widened with impatient. Jeff jerked back his blade out of the tree with hope to cover himself by cutting his face. Then he ran towards the four-legged friend and bent, petting the dog's hair. Ben pointed down to the scent where it was coming from. The footsteps were soaked in dirt. The grinning dog led them to an abandoned shack where probably Masky and Hoodie had taken Serena, or where they're hiding her. Serena stood there watching, her hair with her dark ocean blue eyes. Her eyes were able to blink of a fear that as the masked boy pulled off his mask and his head was clean. It was a side that was on his left side, whatever. Staying quiet for a few moments, breathing deeply, by the tension felt by the girl. She stared wide-eyed at the boy before her. Finally, he breathed and backed one last time before turning to her. Serena's eyes widened. He was around her age, with dirty brown hair that's kind of messy, ocean blue eyes. He was handsome. She wondered why he kept himself hidden. For a moment, Jeff's image flooded through her mind, causing her to look away from the teenager. Her head slowly lifted back to see up, so she could see back at him. He began to speak. "So, what do you think?" he asked. Confusion as he faded, looking away slightly. I stared back at him, confused. "This is the first time I ever took it off?" he asked, pointing at his mask. Looking down at it, he turned his head back to me and then nodded. His hair was spiky. "Yeah, I haven't taken this mask off for a long time," he answered, smiling a small smile. My eyes widened at the surprise that he had kept it on his face for so long. I had forgotten to try to adjust to it. He probably wore it for murders, such as I guess. He just got attention to it as attached to it. I stayed silent, unsure what to say that he noticed through my reaction. "I need to show you." I blinked. "Show me? Show me what? His face? Did he wanted me to see, was the only one to see something, or what?" "Show me what?" I asked, lowering my head. He looked away for a moment, then I could see the bright blush swept across his cheeks as he peered back at me. He gave me a bit of a sheepless look and began inching towards me. Out of instinct, backing away every step he took, I backed into the wall. My eyes widened as he got closer. Suddenly, he wrapped his arms around my waist, and his head was now resting on my back of my shoulder as he pulled me close. He lowered his head, resting on my shoulders, closing his eyes. "To show you how much I care," he whispered into my ear. My dark ocean blue eyes traveled down to his shoulders, now resting my chin on him. I stood silent, unaware of what to do or what to say. Jeff appeared again in my head, his smile, his charcoal eyes staring at me. He disappeared as Masky pulled back and looked at me with a large closed mouth, smiling, gasping in his lips, slowly luring in with his certain eyes shut. Then his lips were inches closer to mine. I stood still, but as he was only a few inches from kissing me, Jeff's face raced through my mind again. I turned my head, and Masky only kissed my pale cheek. He pulled back, and his eyes stared at me confused. He has seen my face. He told me he cared for me, that he loved me. He truly showed me how he felt. "Do you find me that ugly?" Masky asked, and I turned back to him. He had a sad look in his face. His blue eyes were watching me closely. I shook my head. "No. That's not it. It's just I traveled unaware or what to do to answer him. He had an instinct as I watched. I looked down to my feet, and after that, no matter what I do, she's still..." Masky looked back in the darkness as he gazed, knowing what I was going to say. "It's Jeff, isn't it?" he barked. I lifted my head from the ground and looked back at his face in shock. I grew more fearful, seeing his anger looking at me like that, wondering what is he going to do. He seems as I looked, letting me go, then looking to the ground, his hair covering his eye as he stepped away from me. Walking back to the other wall to my left, which was closer, wondering what he was going to do, since the door was the opposite direction of the wall. He stopped in front of it, then clinked his fist. He slowly reached into his pocket, pulling out a large switchblade, flipping it open, and then stabbing it repeatedly against the rotten wall as he pulled it down with anger flowing through his veins, then snapping the blade and pulling it out of the wall, then slashing it across a newly made grass. He slashed it between it before just stabbing it lower. His head was closer and his eyes were bleeding with rage. I had a scared look. I never seen such things before. He lured his arm against the wall and his forehead resting next to it. "He'll never have you," he whispered. "You're mine. I'll protect you. I know everything about you. I care about you, yet you still like him more. When I can make you happy, make sure no one ever makes you sad or touches you, to make you laugh, never letting you cry again, and you still want him?" He stabbed the wall again, along with a few punches of his fist. Then he held his mask and putting it over his shoulders and putting it back on his face. Then putting his switchblade back into his pocket. Before I could hear the sound of the window breaking, catching my ears, I turned back to look at the room of the door to my left. Masky stood there straight and jerked again, walking towards the door and then looking at me. With his white and black mask, he pulled the rope as he stared at me for a moment. "Don't leave this room," he commanded. Then he faced the door and then went out, opening it, then closing and slamming it. I could hear a sound like locking click. I ran over to the door, listened closely. I could hear Masky's footsteps heading down the hallway. Suddenly, as he left the hall, I grabbed the door handle and trying to turn it. It locked. He locked me in from the outside. I glared at the knob. I got back and listening through the door, curious who was going on or what's going on. Ben's point of view. Me and Jeff and Smile were finally reaching what it looks like this abandoned house in the woods. It's about 2 miles from the factory. I'm surprised that Jeff had no clue about it. It was pretty stable, not looking too shabby. It's been abandoned for a few years. Smile Dog was growling at Jeff. Well, I'm pretty sure Masky and Hoodie and Jeff's girl Serena was there. Rain has grown harder. I wonder if Slindy would be there too. "So, ready to kick some proxy's ass?" I asked, pulling out my 2 switchblades I hadn't hidden in my pocket. Jeff nodded and pulled out his kitchen knife out of his hoodie's pocket. Smile Dog was growling, showing his fangs and claws. I looked back at Jeff. Even he had a smile. I could tell that he was pissed. He really likes this girl, doesn't he? Turning back to the house, we could see Hoodie inside, but no Masky or girl. Probably upstairs, I thought. Probably Jeff thought so as well. Let's go. We bolted towards. He passed me and me and Smile to go to the right after him. We quickly jumped up and smashed into the window. Hoodie was seen in. We stood up tall as Hoodie turned to see us, surprise in his face. I smirked at him and Jeff lowered his head, looking with a smile and growling. "Hey Hood, long time no see," I said as he surprised to see his face quickly. "What are you?" He stopped. His face turned to Jeff. He must have not know that Jeff would come exactly looking for the girl. Jeff looked like he was about to kill him. I couldn't feel but to hate the immersions of both of them. Where are they, Hood? He almost yelled, guessing towards and missing the people. Hoodie quickly dodged it and quickly heard footsteps and door slamming, heading from upstairs. Honor, speak of the devil. Here comes Masky, bolting into the room. His eyes slowly shocked to see us. He looked from to me, smiled, then Jeff, between us. He stared for a moment, then he squinted his eyes into a glare. I could hear the demonic growl between Jeff's throat and the tension between the two filled rooms. What are you doing here? Masky asked angrily in his voice. You know why, Jeff remarked, looking ready to jump on the other boy. Masky pulled his hand out of his jacket and turned to his head. Why, Jeff? You mean you're here to take my girl again? I could see that Jeff was pissed. I mean, really pissed off. Jeff's point of view. Something grew inside me. I didn't know what, but that was it. I was so bent a feeling of rage slipping through my body. His girl. Oh, hell no. I rushed towards him, holding my kitchen knife above my head, ready to slice through his chest, but he quickly dodged and pulled out what looked like a large switchblade out of his pocket. He held his hands, about to slash me by missing me by an inch. I darted at him and then tackled him by the waist. I stood above him and slamming my fist down to the side of his masked face. He hissed in pain and lunged towards his two hands grabbed my throat. We switched positions. He was sitting on top of me as he lifted his hands and began pounding down on my chest. Another hit came to the other side of my face. Then I turned to face my friend. Ben was holding Hoodie back while Smile was running and tackled Masky off me. I got up and quickly steadied myself from the blows of my cheek. Looking at Ben, and he called out to me, Jeff, go get Serena. We'll handle these two. Now go. I nodded, then ran upstairs. I skipped few steps to reach the top of the staircase. I looked around me. There's two doors, one on the left and one on the right wall. My eyes darted to the first one. I hurried to open it, pushing the door open, looking around. It had a bed, a stairlight, and a dresser and a lamp in the window, but no Serena. I slammed the door and shut it, hurrying and opened the one across me. It had the same things, but still no Serena. I growled under my breath and was going to the next one, opening it to see no girl. Closing it lightly, I heard a light gushing through the hallway, flickering. I looked down the stairs. There was other ways. The light was below it. Jeff, hurry! We gotta get out of here! Ben yelled. Sounded excited or scared. I knew why. I had to hurry. I opened the door, twisting it up. It was locked. Damn it, of course he will lock her in. I noticed the lock on the outside. I twisted it below an opening, seeing Serena. Serena stood there from sitting on the bed in the room, looking at the door, wide eyes. She seemed scared, but calmed down seeing me. I could still see the fear in her face. I walked fast towards her. I looked across from me, and my eyes widened than normal. Wrestling against the wall, supposedly it was slashed across it. Masky, I looked back at her, hoping she's alright. Are you okay, Serena? I asked, staring deep into her dark ocean blue eyes. She turned and looked at the marks, then back to me with a small smile. Yeah, I'm okay, she said with a lightly breath out of relief. Jeff! Shit! Ben and Smile! I quickly grabbed Serena's hand and I pulled her out of the room and down the stairs, looking down where everyone else was. I froze. Hello, Jeff, an echo voice seemed to said to me. My charcoal eyes got the scourge of anger filling them. With a white, pale, faceless man who was wearing a suit with long arms, standing before me, Jeff, me, Ben, Masky, Smile, and Hoodie. Slender man. I could feel Serena trying to look at him. I quickly stepped in front of her. "Don't look at him," I warned her, and she nodded slowly. I looked back at the monster. "What are you doing here?" I barked, pulling out my knife from my pocket once more. He didn't need to face me for now. He knew he wasn't being threatened by it. He stood there facing me. I wish I had eyelids, for I glared at him if I had. "You attacked Masky and Hoodie. It seems like the times I have slipped in to see what was all about. Who is that girl you're hiding, Jeff?" His dark voice echoed like the voices scratching on a chalkboard. He was glaring to Serena. I tried to keep still. "Why do you want to know?" I lowered my head to look away from him. You better stay away from Serena." "Well, I would like to know why Masky has been riled up about this. So he already knows about her." Great. I stood there in silence. There's no way in hell he knows about Serena. He's definitely on Masky's side. I already know it. Her name is Serena. Hold up. Her name is Serena, Slenderman, Hoodie answered, and telling the man. Slender looked at the boy with the black and red mask. Serena. Slenderman's voice echoed her name as if he was testing it. He looked back to us again. Then, disappearing, I grabbed and looked around in frenzy to find the teleporter again. I could hear Serena's breath catching as I turned to face the devil himself. Serena's point of view. I was meant to face, well, something without a face. A tall man called Slenderman stood tall above me. If he had eyes, I'm pretty sure he has been staring down at me. I mostly couldn't blink. Everyone gasped at us, surprised. "Serena!" Jeff yelled at Slenderman, knife about to ready to attack. Slenderman's face jerked back at Jeff, and soon hitting him and looking what looked like a large tentacle. I watched as the 17-year-old tumbled down the staircase. My attention brought back to Slenderman, scared. He's just looking at me, not doing anything. I felt like it was he was studying me. But the faceless began looking as his appearance has changed. His faceless and his long arms and his black and white suit was intimidating and then enough. I looked back to Jeff and the others. He began to speak. "You once entered my woods with your friend Samantha. Am I correct?" I looked at him confused, lifting an eyebrow. Then reminding me and Sam, we had been 10 years old when we had first entered the woods. Tay was too busy because she couldn't make it. We had to come looking for adventure, as all little kids normally do, when they do that in first place of interest. I remember Sam feeling strange that someone was watching us. Her head began to pound like crazy and then left before we could ever see the figure. For the moment was watching us as we left. You're the one that was watching us," I whispered, looking at him. He nodded lightly, and then my eyes widened. I felt like such an old memory just passed, and I remembered all of a sudden. "I wanted to meet you, but my powers kept me from doing so, as they do to other children and people. But yet," he stopped for a moment, and I'm guessing to think, started staring at me, and began to speak again. "You're not affected," he said in a simple way, but I could tell that he was a bit surprised. Affected? Wait, his powers have caused Sam to have those headaches and blurry visions? Is that why Sam was so scared of everything? What caused you? So you did that to Sam? I asked, staring at him intensely. And then his face nodded, then and folded my arms. Something unforgivable, but now you are a child, but not who was inferior to it, infused with it. He would continue speaking, looking his arms towards the base of the top of my head. I stared at him. His tone of voice sounded sad. I always wanted, as a child, not to fear me. You're not the one who's normally afraid of those things. Why all of a sudden that his powers couldn't affect me? I didn't fear him. He looked away, taking his hands from my head. I smiled in confusing smile. Well, you're not very scary. I was scared of you at first, but now I could see that you just wanted a friend. His face turned back to me. I'm pretty sure if he had one, he would be one of surprise. Looking down at the others in the abandoned shack living room, they were all looking surprised or shocked by the scene. Taking out Masky and Hoodie because of their masks, especially Jeff, I looked back at Slenderman, who was looking at them as well. Rushing towards, I wrapped my arms around him, catching him off guard, my arms around him, closing him into a hug. I whispered to his chest, I'll be your friend. He stood there in silence, most likely unaware of what to do, reaching his arms around me, most likely hugging me back. We pulled back and stared at each other's faces once more. He had a look of asking something. He understood that. He turned and looked at the two boys and the dog. Woody, Masky, with me. He disappeared and then teleported at the door. The two masked boys, teens, looked at each other, then walked out of the room. Cinderman teleported most likely outside. Masky stand up and stared at the open door. Then he turned his attention to me and then lowered his eyebrows in a sad way. Then closing them. Then he turned to face Jeff and his new friends. He opened the door, opened his ocean eyes and glared as they were actually glaring at Jeff. This isn't over, Jeff Masky muttered out loud so we could all hear him. He turned and then jogged after Hoodie. I stared with my ocean blue eyes, looking after him when they left the room. Smile Dog was growling. Ben was looking up the direction where the boys left. Walking up the stairs, I walked up to them, all of them. They were all three of them looking at me. Jeff smiled widened. Serena, he hugged me once more, then reaching out, then I stared. He pulled back and stepped in between his friends. Serena, this is Ben and Smile Dog. They helped me find you. My eyes traveled to Ben. He was waving with a greeting that says, Hiya. So you're Jeff's girl. Not bad, Jeffy. Me and Jeff grew deep red as Jeff turned towards him with anger in his charcoal eyes. Ben was laughing as Jeff started yelling at him. I turned my attention to Smile Dog, the only thing that traveled to the ground. I grew scared at the black and red growling husky staring above me. And for a moment I thought he was going to bite my face off. The fear disappeared as he barked and wagged his tail and began licking my whole face. I laughed at his tongue tickling my face. Okay, Smile, that's enough, Jeff said. Smile hopped off me as I stand up once more, grabbing Jeff's hand and pulling me up to his face. I blinked my dark ocean blue eyes and traveled up to Jeff. We both looked at each other and he took my hand as he yanked me up to his arms. I was shocked by the first time as he pulled me looking into him. Time to go home, he chuckled before bolting out the door, and the other boy and the dog was following. Jeff's point of view. We reached the factory about 10 minutes. As I set Serena down in front of Ben and Smile were standing with us, we looked up. Ben was yawning and stretching his arms. He said, time for me to shut my eyes, Ben said, walking him inside. I looked at Smile Dog. He looked at me and Serena, and then he nudged Serena's hand and chased after Ben. As we watched him go inside, I looked at Serena. Her long silver hair was soaked from pacing in the rain, which had ended a few moments before. She was shivering from the wind hitting us. I'm used to these type of temperatures, so it wasn't affecting me at all. I barely noticed that there was even a breeze. She was feeling my strange. I could feel her staring at me. I looked away as I blushed. I didn't know what to do about her. What makes me feel this way? I peeked back at her. She nodded confusion in her eyes. I quickly grabbed her hand and told her, "Let's go inside." "What?" she muttered. I sighed her nervous. Well, why was I nervous? Damn it. I need to talk to Ben or something about this. "Inside, you're gonna get sick," I shouted, looking at her. She jumped, appeared of my reaction. I lowered my eyes and to the ground. I feel a little bad now. "Wait, what?" You're gonna get sick if you stay out here like this," I said in a calming voice. She stared at me for a moment, then nodded. I led her inside, looking down at her hand. I opened the door, and as she walked in, we were both walking in and walking inside the steam-warm factory.